Welcome to another episode of the One-on-One. We have here today is Margo Bisnow, and I want to welcome her to the show. But first, before I say that, let me go ahead and just kind of give you a little overview about her. She spent 20 years in government, including as an FTC commissioner and staff director of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. For the last 10 years, she has spoken to parent groups about raising creative, confident, resilient children who achieve their dreams. She served as an advisor to the EQ Generation, an after-school program in New York City that gives children the skills to succeed. On the advisory board of the Muse School in Malibu that prepares young people to live consciously through passion-based learning, and on the board of Spark, the journey in Washington, D.C. that mentors low-income high school students to achieve college and career success. Her new book is Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams, 99 Stories from Families Who Did It. Margo, thank you for joining us. Can tell us about this book that you have?
Well, thank you so much. Here it is.
Yes, Raising an Entrepreneur is something that I talk about quite often with my audience about raising an entrepreneur, about investing, about all of that stuff.
So I interviewed 70 entrepreneurs and their parents about how they were raised.
Right.
I was just so curious how they turned out the way they did. Just so, willing to work so hard to put their idea into action and to take on so much risk and to be so single-minded in their pursuit. And I was just so curious how they were raised, if there were any commonalities. And so I picked a very diverse group. It's half men, it's half women, it's every race, it's every religion, it's every socioeconomic background, from parents who were doctors to parents who didn't go to college. It's parents born overseas, kids born overseas, kids whose families have been here forever, small towns, big cities, small families, big families, blended families, single kids, kids with 7 siblings, just like you name it, as diverse as I could find. And to my shock, they were basically all raised the same.
Okay. So when you say all raised the same, like what was that particular mindset? Because, whether you're coming from a low income family, or you're coming from a rich established family, you're saying that the mindset is still the same.
The mindset of the parents was still the same. And it's kind of like what we were just chatting about for a minute before the show started, that so many parents today, I think they just don't understand that the world has changed from when they grew up.
Right.
So when people my age grew up, there was a path you had to follow if you wanted to be successful.
Right.
You had to study every class in high school. You had to get good grades in every class in high school. You had to have lots of extracurricular activities so you could have a really good application for a really good college. You had to graduate from this really good college. And then probably you had to go and get a graduate degree at a really good college. And that path still works for some people, but it doesn't necessarily work for a lot of people. And there's so many people for whom that path is just completely broken. And parents need to understand that if that's not the path for your child, you can't force your child on that path, because they'll just end up miserable. There's so many kids today who are miserable because that's the path their parents are forcing them on. And it just, if your kid is happy just studying science all day because they want to be a doctor, that's great. But if your kid's miserable, you got to deal with it. You got to figure it out. You got to support your kid. You can't just let your kid be floundering.
And I agree with you 100%. Even with my son and following his dreams, I know from firsthand experience, coming from a low income family, and my mom did the best she could. Okay. And at that time, one of the things I wanted to do was, play basketball. It was one of my favorite things to do. I played in the neighborhood, played rec basketball, but there wasn't much investment in playing basketball. There wasn't a private coach. There wasn't training camps or anything like that. And I pursued other ventures, like I played soccer, played football and everything in different training camps. But there's nothing like that investment from a parent that is 100% behind you, that say, you know what, if this is something that you want to do, let's go ahead and pursue it. If your child wants to dance, and then invest in dance. If they want to do karate, invest in karate, and then continue that pursuit until they just don't want to do it anymore. But instead, you have parents out here that are forcing them down a path that they don't want to go. They're not passionate about. They're just doing it because, well, my mom and my dad wanted me to do this, so I achieved it. I don't like it. It doesn't make me happy, but I'm going to do it because this is what they want me to do. They want me to live out their dreams. And I think there's a few parents in that same bucket that wants to live out their dreams to their kids, and their kids are not even passionate about what they're doing.
I mean, I'd like to say in the parents' defense, I think they think they're doing it to help their kid.
Okay.
I think they think they're doing it because they think that if their child doesn't follow this path, their child can't be successful. And they're wrong. They're just wrong. And, I can't tell you how many, my younger son's a musician. I can't tell you how many parents I would talk to in high school, when he was still in high school, and their child loved music just like my child did. And I would say, so when your child goes to college, are you going to let them major in music? And they're like, oh no, when he goes to college, he has to do some, major in something useful so he can get a real job.
That's the big term right there. Real job. Like what is a real job? Every job is a job.
Exactly. And then these parents, they'll say like, oh my gosh, they might not make enough money to live if they pursue this weird path. And I'm like, so you'd rather they took a different path and they were just miserable for the next 50 years? That's your goal for them? Just do something you hate every day, 40 hours a week for the next 40 years, just be miserable? Like, hello?
Yes, that's that. So, and that's it. Live out my dreams, be miserable for the next 50 years. Don't do what you're passionate about. So tell me, when you were interviewing, or when you came up with the idea for this book, what was the importance of publishing this book? Like, it's definitely a major find here.
I want to scream this, and thank you for helping me get it to more people, because people just still don't get it. Teen unhappiness is at an all-time level. And, when you talk to these unhappy kids, it's because they've never been given the time and the space and the encouragement to find something that gives them joy. It's so sad. And you asked me, like, what did they all have in common? And it's exactly what you said. Every parent in this book supported their child's passion.
Mm-hmm.
And every child in this book who ended up becoming an entrepreneur had a passion outside of school. Every single one. And, that's one reason I just hate this whole SAT thing and, grades thing to get into college, because it's true. We need doctors, we need accountants, we need lawyers, but those people aren't going to shake the world.
No. I mean, you don't really hear about kids want to go be senators or House of Representatives, being House Representatives. They're not talking about anything like that. They're not talking about going to government. They're not talking about being economists. You don't hear anything. I've seen videos where kids are talking about, I want to be a YouTube star. I want to be a TikToker. I want to be, this type of famous, not realizing that at the end of the day, what does that really mean? Is that really fueling and putting money back into the economy? Is that putting money back into Social Security with these dreams that they have, that they see now in the digital age? So, and if it's a passion that they have, it's not saying that you shouldn't cultivate it, but still kind of push for something that is, I don't know, something that kind of stimulates and still fuels the economy in some kind of way.
But what you're talking about is they're saying their passion is to do something that makes them famous, or their passion is to do something that makes them rich. And that's completely different from these people who became entrepreneurs.
Right.
They had a passion for something they actually loved. Maybe it was dancing, maybe it was writing, maybe it was building things, maybe it was fixing things, maybe it was sports. Whatever it was, it was something that they really, really loved. And you mentioned sports. It really surprised me. I'd say about a third of these people played sports at an elite level, like on into college.
Yeah.
And none of them does anything with sports today professionally. One of them became a football player for a while, but none of them do anything with sports today. But what did that do? The fact that they were passionate about sports and doing it. I mean, my older son was a tennis player. We don't play tennis, but he was playing 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, he doesn't do anything professionally with tennis, but what does that teach them? It teaches them grit. It teaches them the trade-off between, hard work and success. It teaches them how to pivot when they're not succeeding. It teaches them about failure, and that failure is how you learn and grow. And it teaches them, about determination and all these great things. And then later on in life, when they discover what it is they do want to do, they'll have all the skills necessary to translate it into being successful. So that's kind of like you were doing all these sports when you were young.
Yeah.
And to, then you learned like, oh, now I want to do something else, but here's how I can take all those things I learned about hard work, and about, refining it until I get it right, and about pivoting until it's perfect, and about, failure when something isn't working, like make it work, and how to win when you're not on your A game. And I mean, all these different things that help you today.
You're absolutely right. So I want to ask, now the entrepreneurs that you have talked about, and we talked about they having the same mindset. What was the characteristics that they had in common as well?
So the main thing was they all had a passion outside of school, and all of their parents supported that passion. And for some of the parents, trust me, it was like a big gulp. It's like, but
I think I had that big goal with my son change from engineering to something completely different. I was like, okay, you don't want to do engineering no more? Oh my God, okay. What are we going to do?
right. One of the people in my book, I think in some ways it was even more true for the immigrant parents who just had this idea that their kids were going to become, engineers or doctors or whatever. And this one person in my book, Thomas View, he was one semester from graduating with a degree in like engineering, and he got an opportunity to leave school and join the first intern class of electronic arts. His passion was always video games,
Okay.
and he became the lead producer on League of Legends.
Awesome. That is so awesome.
And he said, like, his parents kind of had to do a big gulp, and like every few months his mom would call him like, "You're sure you don't want to go back to school?" And she'd say, "Well, okay, as long as you're happy." I mean, it was a big gulp, but I mean, that's the main thing, is that all of these young people had a passion outside of school, and because they chose it and they worked really hard at it and they got really good at it, they became confident in their ability to succeed if they worked at something hard enough. And all of the parents said to their children, I know if you work hard enough at something that you can be successful. And they all said, don't be discouraged with inevitable setbacks, because I know you're going to get there eventually. And I mean, that was like the main thing. I can tell you like lots of other things they all had in common, but that was the main thing. And it's just so important for parents, not to say, hey, stop spending so much time painting or cooking or dancing or building or playing sports or whatever, and go inside and study your trigonometry. Like, they're going to be okay without trigonometry.
I haven't used trigonometry since I left high school. Like they don't. I haven't even seen it. I don't even think they teach it in college. But unless you're going into engineering, yeah.
I know. My husband always says, like, when you're in 10th grade and they make you take geometry and they say someday this is going to be useful, and he says, when it's useful, when your kid is in 10th grade and they're studying geometry. You have to help them.
So one thing I kind of want to chime in there. You had said they had talked about setbacks. So when we're talking about setbacks, how much did in the characteristics, if you can recall, how much did failure play into that? You know, having a setback and then keep going forward, having another setback and keep going forward, just that determination behind it.
Every Absolutely 100%. Like if I think that's one of the biggest differences between entrepreneurs and people who go into different lines of business. Entrepreneurs are risk takers. If you're not willing to take on risk, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. If you're afraid to fail, you're not willing to take on risks. So doctors and lawyers and architects and accountants, people in finance, they don't want to fail. Entrepreneurs are okay with failing. And I have example after example after example of how their first company didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And, they gave it up, or they sold it, or they merged it, or they just quit. And then they figured out what to do differently. And they started the next one, and on and on and on. I mean, and this is actually the second edition of my book. I mean, one reason that I did a second edition is half of them are doing something different today from when I did the first one
Wow.
10 years ago. Because, that's just life, man, being able to pivot and learn from your failure and move on. And so many of them talked about how that was like one of the greatest gifts their parents gave them, was not to be afraid to fail. I love the quote by Billie Jean King. She says, "We don't call it failure, we call it feedback."
I like that. We don't call it failure, we call it feedback. Now that statement is very inspiring right there, because I know from a lot of people that I talk to, and even and growing up as a kid, we wasn't taught that failure was an option, and we were taught that we wasn't taught that you can succeed on the other side of failure. We knew that failure wasn't an option. We had to keep proceeding. But what did it really mean without the action or the example that goes behind it? You could tell somebody, success is on the other side of failure. But if you don't see it in your everyday life, or you don't see it, being raised as a kid, it's kind of like, okay, well, we talk about sports, for instance. No, we played this basketball game. We got to the championship. We lost. But you got to go back into the lab. You got to go work out, do everything you need to do, and then get back to the championship next year. Some people may take that championship loss as like, okay, well, I'm not good enough. Maybe I should just quit.
No.
And it's like, okay, well, you're gonna have failures in life, and failures are okay. And I think a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but there's some people that feel like failure is there's a big fear of failure, and they're so scared of failure that they think that failure is just ultimately the end of everything. I failed. There's no need to try it again. How can I proceed forward if I know I'm gonna keep failing? And it becomes a mindset.
Yeah. And parents, all of these parents, when their kids failed, they never scolded them. They never punished them. They said, "What did you learn? What will you do differently next time?" And I mean, every famous entrepreneur says, it's not failure is not failing. Failure is not getting back up. Right? Failure is not trying again. Roger Federer, the great tennis player, gave an incredible commencement address at Dartmouth in the spring, which is on YouTube, which is fascinating to listen to. And he said, here's the greatest tennis player, of our lives. And he said, even though he won, I think, 80% of his games, he lost 50% of every point he played in matches.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if you're focusing on the points you lose, if you're focusing on your failures, you're never going to succeed in life. You have to keep moving forward. You have to keep looking ahead. And I just thought that was so interesting for him to tell all these graduates, getting ready to go out into the world, like, don't look at the things you got wrong. Don't look at the mistakes you made. Figure out what you should do differently and just keep going. That's the lesson. Keep going, keep trying, keep working at it.
You definitely have to keep going. success doesn't stop when you fail. You only gain success as you progress forward and you keep going. You
Right.
know, and I think that applies to a lot of things in a lot of different scenarios. So let me ask you, how are entrepreneurs different from other professions? Those that go to college or those that work their way up through the organization. But entrepreneurs, you say they are risk takers. So they are a different breed of people that are willing to go out there and, as they say, lace it up by the bootstrap and go ahead and get the grit and get it done.
So for me, an entrepreneur is anyone who starts anything. It's not just somebody who starts a business. It can be an activist. I mean, it can be an artist. I mean, my son has a band. He's an entrepreneur. He had to find other people to play in the band. He had to find a manager. He has to find someone who can do the I don't know anything about music, the front of house and the back of house.
I don't either.
He's an entrepreneur, and you can be an entrepreneur in somebody else's organization. I know someone who's in my book. She worked at the United Nations Foundation, and not a particularly entrepreneurial organization, but she started something called Nothing But Nets, which delivered bed nets for malaria in Africa. So she's an entrepreneur. She started something. I think that you can be entrepreneurial regardless of your job. And I think if you have these characteristics, whatever you do, you're going to do it better. A lot of these people did take normal jobs after college, and after 2 years, they just quit and said, "I'm done. I have an idea. I'm going to do something else." Somebody in my book, Paige Mikowski, who started Aviator Nation. I mean, she had like a regular job after college, and for her like 24th birthday or something, she got, each of her grandparents gave her $100, and she bought a used sewing machine. She called her parents. She said, "I'm quitting my job. I'm giving up my apartment in San Francisco. I'm moving home. I'm living in my, childhood bedroom, and I'm going to start sewing." And her mom was like, "Great." And, she's like one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America now.
Wow.
Um, so, and then the other thing about college, like, I would say there's not any correlation between success in school or how far you go in school and whether you become an entrepreneur. Like maybe a third of these people breezed through Ivy League schools. Some even got advanced degrees. Maybe, half of them, like a third of them didn't even graduate from college. And like, I don't know, 20% of them didn't even go to college. And probably about half of them were miserable in school, even if they stayed in. So there's not necessarily a correlation between being a good student and becoming entrepreneurial. I can go into why if you want.
Yeah. Because the thing here is that, we want to gather an understanding that you can be an entrepreneur, as you said, you can be an entrepreneur in any way, shape, or fashion, whether you're an activist or you're within an organization.
Right. And I would just say to parents whose kids aren't happy in school, many future entrepreneurs aren't happy in school because what most schools want is for kids to sit there quietly and listen and then tell the teacher what they just heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not the personality of a lot of future entrepreneurs who want to ask questions, who want to do things differently, who don't like sitting still, And so if your child is unhappy in school, you can't just force them to stay there. You have to figure it out and try to give them some other options.
Right.
But anyhow, I have something in my book, if you'll let me read,
Please.
that I say, even if your child doesn't want to be an entrepreneur, encouraging them to become more entrepreneurial by promoting certain attitudes can only be a good thing. All children thrive if they learn to believe in themselves, to pursue their true passions, to find new ways to solve old problems, to see opportunity where others see the status quo, to be willing to take on a challenge without proper credentials, to work with single-minded determination to achieve a goal, to take on risk if a project is worth trying, to learn that building something wonderful is its own reward, regardless of how much money you make, to view failure as feedback and setbacks as learning experiences, and to dream big dreams. And
Wow.
so every parent, if they bring their kids up that way, maybe they'll become an entrepreneur, maybe they won't. If you want to become an entrepreneur, you have to work really long hours and you
Yeah.
have to take on a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for a lot of people at certain points in their life. Maybe they're raising young kids or, whatever. Like, I get that. Like, you don't have to become an entrepreneur. But if you're more entrepreneurial, whatever you do, you'll be successful.
And I would take a page from your book, and I would add my own. Because before I started doing podcasting, I had wrote some books. Oh, and a few years ago, I wrote some books, and then from there, it kind of was like a, a try and try type of thing. So I went from, writing books to thinking about doing something else. So I wanted to go and start writing scripts. So then it evolved to writing scripts. Then it went from writing scripts to, okay, now I want to make a cartoon. So I want to write the scripts to make a cartoon. And the other thing with that, with the entrepreneur mindset is that when you can't find somebody to do it, you learn how to do it yourself, and you
Right.
kind of procure those skills, and it kind of just evolves from there. So I went to writing the scripts, couldn't find anybody to do the cartoon, so then I started doing the cartoon myself. And then once I kind of got through that, I was like, okay, well, this is fun, but it's costing me more time than I'm getting out of it. So then it kind of started to balloon somewhere else, and coincidentally, some friends brought me into podcasting, and then it kind of directed me to do podcasting on my own. And in that entrepreneurial mindset, I'm doing the cover arts. I'm doing everything that several people would do in in a whole production for a podcast. And it's interesting because when we talk about entrepreneurs and being risk takers, and we talk about the long hours, it's a risk putting yourself out there trying to see if people are going to relate to you. It putting in the long hours, coming in from, you could have another job, coming in from another job, just turning around and put in another 8 hours, investing into yourself. And I think that's where that's one of the characteristics that's important, is learning to invest in yourself and take that risk and go beyond. And, and that's that is one thing that I do try to tell my son is, definitely invest in yourself. If you are going to work for somebody or you are going to do something, make sure you still take time to invest in yourself, whether it's reading or anything. And, I try to make sure I help him pursue his passions and give him all the networks and connections that he needs to fulfill his passion, his desire, just everything that he needs to do, so he can be a little bit more self-efficient and doesn't have to rely on somebody holding the candle, to his paycheck and everything. You can go and develop your own paycheck, because entrepreneur, either they're providing a service to the world, whether it's development or anything, or providing a service to an organization, as you stated, or being an activist and trying to change the world and change the mindset of people.
Right. Right. Whatever their joy is, whatever makes them happy. And as you discovered, like, it's not like you have to have discovered something and then just keep that up for your whole life. Like,
Right.
things kind of, develop and, mutate and move and change and evolve and grow. And that's great. That's fine.
Yeah.
And the same with, the kid, their passion when they were young. Some of them, especially the ones who became artists, the dancers, the actors, the singers, the movie directors, they were doing this from the time they were young, and they found it and they just went with it. But almost everyone else, their passion when they were young is completely different from what they're doing today. And some of them, they had two or three passions when they were young, but whatever they were doing, their parents supported. And then no matter how good they were, like, they were the best ice skater in the state. And then they said, I'm done ice skating. I want to go do something else. And their parents didn't say, no, you have to keep it up. They're like, cool, go for it.
Right. And I think that is so essential to be able to pivot with your kids and support their passion. And I think that's one thing, Farewell fans, I want y'all to understand is if your kids pivot, you should definitely pivot with them. If they don't want to do sports and they want to do something else, go along with them and do that. They may come back to sports, they may not, but just go ahead and make that pivot. That is a great point. So let me ask you, what attitude did their parents instill in them about money as they were growing up?
So that was something that was so interesting to me. Even the kids who came from wealthy families, their parents made them work for anything they wanted. They were, I'm not going to buy it for you. If you want it, you can get a job. You can figure out how to make money to, earn money to buy the thing you want. And it really instilled in them the importance of what, of money and of hard work. And there's not one person that I talked to whose parents said, here, just take whatever money you need, and go get whatever you want. Like it's,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. And I think money is, regardless of the type of lifestyle you come from, money is very essential to living. And showing your kids how to manage their money, save their money, invest their money, I believe is, a very crucial aspect. Because when I was growing up, short story, when I was growing up, I didn't know what saving money was. I didn't know what investing was. And I knew when I got older, I know I wanted to invest. I actually took a class in investments. And and I don't want to speak my age, but this was back when you had to go into the newspaper to look at what the stock price was and how much it went up and down, and then you had to calculate it on your own. So these were during those times before it became popular on the internet, before Robinhood, before any of that stuff came into play, where you could just go online and you could become a retail investor and you could just kind of start to invest for yourself. When I was looking at going into investments, the access to investing threshold was so high that it was kind of difficult to get in to actually invest. I was speaking with some financial advisors, and me and my son was sitting there because I wanted to start an investment portfolio for him as well as for myself. And I was kind of showing him how money works and the benefit of a dollar and the value of it. And they were saying that just to get in to have an acceptable portfolio was like $10,000. To get into the investment portfolio. And I was like, man, that's a lot of money. A few years later, then you had Robinhood come out, and before that, you had another one that came out, and it was such a spectacular opening to investing, for the low income family, that they could just get into investing and invest in the things that matter to them. Whether it was GameStop, whether it was Home Depot or Coca-Cola, Pepsi, anything that they wanted to invest in, then they could invest in it at small amounts. And I think that is kind of like a big thing. So when that happened, I had turned and said, I wanted to start his own portfolio, and it became easier to start his own portfolio because now the money threshold to get in was actually lower than what I was given by the financial advisors. So I was able to teach him how to, do the same practices, put 15% up in your investments, 10% up into your savings, and then everything else you have, is, for leisure because he don't have any bills. So, teaching him these money mechanics, so he can get an understanding of how he can use money for his best benefit. And, I think, it's happening more now, but when we talk about 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't too much of a thought in, low income families to, have a trust fund and, do all of these things to be able to put their kids in a financial position to where when they turn 18, they have an idea of how to spend their money, and they're not spending it frivolously on just any and everything.
Right, right. It's so part of it is learning to invest, and part of it is learning the value of money.
Right.
And and um, and then it's interesting because there's a whole different set of problems for wealthy parents. Um, and I have a whole section in my book of these entrepreneurs who grew up not wealthy.
Right.
They became very successful,
Mhm.
and they are wealthy, and now they're raising kids,
Yeah.
and they want their kids to grow up with the same grit that they grew up in when they're being raised in very different circumstances.
Right.
And as someone said, it's not we can't buy it for you, it's we won't buy it for you.
Okay.
And then you have to be able to explain why you won't and what your values are. And I have a whole section in here about just kind of a lot of the stories, and some of it when you're raising kids that are and you just have a lot more money. One of my favorites is uh, Michael Wilbon, who's a sportscaster on TV.
Yeah.
And, his I think his son was like 5 years old and loved golf, and they were playing golf, and his son hit the ball badly a few times, and he just threw his club down on the ground and said, "Where's a caddy when you need one?" And
Okay.
and his dad said, "Pick up your damn golf club. We're not. There's no caddy here."
Now,
And he said actually his son caddied all through high school.
okay.
But I mean, it's just it's a different world, and it's different problems, it's different issues.
It
Um,
is.
Another person in my book, Arturo Nunez, he'd grown up like poor, and at the time he was working for Nike, and in wherever they are, Portland, and he said to his son, "Hey, let's come out into the. I want to go out and shoot some hoops in the driveway. Why don't you? Will you go out first and sweep up the leaves?" And his son, like not trying to be obnoxious, but just kind of saying, life the way it was, like, "Oh, I don't do that. Why don't I call, Miguel or whatever?"
Yeah.
And his father was like, "I don't do that. I don't do that. Are you kidding me? You get upstairs, you get the damn rake, and you sweep the leaves." But I mean, it's just funny. Like, you have to explain to it, it's a whole different set of issues.
It is. It is. And that reminds me of, I was kind of just scrolling through Instagram one time, and I seen this video where, this guy that was well off, came from a low income family, and basically stated that, my kids are so spoiled and well off that, just as you stated, they don't want to do the minute things. So it was like, I had to end up manufacturing my kids' struggle. Like I struggled when I was a kid. And I have to manufacture their struggle because they don't know what it is to struggle. Like my son doesn't know what it is to catch the bus. I had to walk to school. I had to catch the bus. There was like after fourth grade, there was no rides to school. It was all walking and catching the bus. And I had to get my son in high school, like, look, you got to catch the bus. Like, you got to understand the struggle to catching the bus. And it kind of drove me to want to get a car. So I was like, I don't want to catch the bus anymore. I don't want to have to wait here in the rain and the snow, any of that stuff. And it kind of pushed me to want to get a car because, I understood what it meant to have to wait on somebody else to do for me. And that's waiting for the bus. Right. And I had to manufacture my son's struggle. Like, you don't want to drive. Okay, well, I can't continue to take you to school because either I had to be at work like super early or You got to come in early with me, and then you got to go to school, or you get out of school late, or you get out of school early, and then you got to catch a bus home. So I had to kind of generate his struggle a little bit just so he can kind of get an understanding of, yes, it's good now, but it's not always going to be good. There's some times where you're going to have to catch the bus, and you need to know how to do these things, like as a person, to find other means of transportation. But now they have like Lyft, Uber, and everything. Is like, okay, you have all this access to different levels of transportation. Like, you don't have to call a taxi and wait for them. Like, you can call an Uber, and you can see them navigate to navigate to your house. It's such a convenience, and everybody's just like, okay, well, I'll just do that. I don't have to catch a bus. I'll just do that. It's like, okay, that's easy, but where's the like the figuring out part? Like, walking down the street, not knowing the street names and trying to figure out by location where you are and everything. It's interesting because, again, like you said, it's a different time, and children are accessing the things that we had to do when we were younger. They're accessing them differently and going about them differently because of the access they have through technology.
Right. And this is sort of a side, comment about one of the points you made, which is um, parents today, they just drive their kids everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then their kid turns 16 and there's like, here's the car keys. Now you drive yourself everywhere. And it's like half of driving yourself somewhere is not just learning how to use a car,
Right.
but it's learning, like you're saying, how to get somewhere,
Right.
like navigating.
Yeah.
And like a year or two before our kids started driving, we made them start taking the metro
Mm-hmm.
because that's part of, the whole thing is like learning how to figure out it. So we live in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you know, but
Yeah.
anyhow, it's got these 4 quadrants. And so my son had taken the metro to where he was training to play tennis, which is in College Park, Maryland. And he wanted to stop and get his rackets strung. And he took what he thought was the right metro. And anyhow, he'd gotten off at like 17th Street Northeast instead of 17th Street Northwest.
Okay.
And he called me, he's like, this doesn't look right, Like, so, I mean, but that's important, like to learn, how to navigate. It's important, not just learning how to operate a car.
Right.
But
And
all the parents, I mean, even the parents that were wealthy, they would say, like, you want earphones, you want rollerblades, you want a new phone, whatever. Like, you're going to have to work for it. Like, I'm not just giving you the money. And then, like you said, they said, okay, you've just earned, $50. You need to put $10 into an investment and $10 into a charitable thing. And, then whatever's left, you can spend on the thing you want.
right.
And I think it's really important for parents to teach their children that, not just hand them stuff.
Yeah. I 100% agree. When you hand kids stuff, I feel like they lose the value and what it is. Like, I thought about gifting my son, one of my cars, and then I decided against it because I was like, when I first got my car, I had to work 2 jobs to get it, and by the time that I got it, I valued that car a lot more and put more time, money, and investment into that car to keep it going because it was my first car. I valued it. So for my son, I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna have you buy your first car. And when he bought it, I can see the value that he has on it, the concern that he has for it, make sure he's driving it correctly and everything. Like, he put so much more care into it. As if I was to gift it to him, it's like, okay, well, he'll probably just give me another one. So, I'm not going to have as much concern and care for this car as I would for a car that is mine, so to speak. So, you know, I know we had talked about schools earlier, so and I wanted to ask this question: what can schools do to like nurture entrepreneurship?
Oh, wow. So I think what's really important is both for schools and for parents to encourage curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
not just to spit back material they've been given, but to ask questions,
Right.
to seek information. Um, why was it done this way? How could it have been done differently? What can we learn from this? How can we adjust what we're thinking about this? If are there different ways to look at this? Just learning to be curious is so important. And again, I know it's harder for schools, but not punishing failure, but just saying like, okay, you didn't do that well on this. What did you learn? What are you going to do differently? Um, and then just kind of to, understand that not everybody is going to be exactly the same. I mean, one of the people in my book, Benny Blanco, who's become one of the country's biggest pop music producers, his mom told me she got a call like every week when he was in kindergarten complaining that he wouldn't sit in the reading circle.
Mm-hmm.
And, she, she used to say, so, um, but, um, and she said like all his teachers thought he was really annoying. And then she found a music teacher outside of school who said he was the most talented kid he'd ever worked with. And that just meant so much to him. And he's just become this huge superstar. Um, another person in my book, Adam Braun, who started Pencils of Promise, his mom got a call from the teacher saying, Adam doesn't seem to like to sit still for the whole class.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom said, well, couldn't you just have him sit in the back row? And then if he stands up, it won't bother people. And the teacher was like, oh, sure. So it's just kind of you know, learning to adapt to different people's learning styles and realize that not everybody learns the same way.
Okay. And I definitely understand, when I was in another quick story, when I was in high school, I didn't know that they had certain business classes as electives that was like I guess it was like in the school class book or whatnot. And I didn't know they had any class until like I was a senior. It was like business math, entrepreneurship and everything. And I think that, they should have more classes for creative learning, along with the core activities, or at least, a little bit more prominent, in these schools where kids can be more imaginative and be more creative, and kind of explore those talents a little bit more. And I think it'd be beneficial to enhance and grow the creativity than to, sit, wait to be called on, kind of like a factory, like just sit there, taking this information. And then when you go to the test, you apply it to the test. And
Exactly.
it kind
Yeah,
of limits the creativity, kind of limits, where I would say the consciousness of the actual, person, because now they're geared towards taking tests. Even now, even when you apply for a job, is a test before you can even decide to have an interview in some cases. Um, and it's just gearing society to for testing, more testing, and not allowing them to be creative, branch out, and be imaginative in every sense. And
I
I think
agree.
schools need to do a better job of allowing kids, even in high school, to be more creative and not say it's just an elective, but make it a core part of the class curriculum, where they can be more imaginative, they can be more creative, and anything. Or let the kids can create a curriculum of, that can help them explore more and be more creative, and not
Absolutely.
just testing.
Absolutely. No, and as I said before, I just think college's emphasis on taking tests and the SAT, it's just so silly. Like, yeah, sure, maybe 20% of your students you want to be good test takers, but 100% of your students, really?
Right.
Like, like what?
That's it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. But Margot, I wanted to thank you for coming on to the show. Farewell fans, make sure you go ahead and get her book, Raising an Entrepreneur. 99 Stories of Families that did it. We really appreciate you coming on. Hey, farewell fans. I'll catch y'all on the next go around. Peace.